In this guide, I'll be teaching you everything you need to know about Balanced Druid in Season 4. We'll go over talents, rotation, stat priority, gear, consumables, enchants, and any macros that I use. Moving straight into the class side of the talent tree then, we'll go over some of the most notable talents we'll be running as a Balanced Druid. First, we'll be taking Frenzied Regeneration as one of our main defensives, and we'll buff this and Bark Skin further with Verdant Heart. This also allows us to build down to Thick Hide, which is going to reduce our damage intake across the board by 6%. We'll pick up some extra defensives in Well-Honed Instincts to passively heal us when we get low, as well as Renewal as an active 30% heal for when we're in trouble. Wild Charge will change dependent on the form we're in. We can use it to disengage in Moonkin form, leap to an ally in human form, or charge the target in cat or bear form. The Druid class tree boasts a lot of utility, so we'll be picking up Incapacitating Roar on the left side, allowing us to mass AoE interrupt in melee range. We'll pick up Typhoon on the right side to displace mobs, as well as Ursol's Vortex to slow mobs and pull them back to a designated spot. Innovate will allow us to infuse a friendly healer, making all of their spells free to cast for the next 8 seconds, and to help our healers even further, we'll take Nature's Vigil underneath, converting 20% of our single target damage into healing for 15 seconds. This is best paired up with your offensive cooldowns for maximum healing. There are some flexible points in the class tree utility-wise. We can take Remove Corruption, Hibernate, and Soothe, or you can swap these points out for even more defensive options if you're clearing more challenging content. Next, we'll move on to the balance-specific talents. There's a few different builds dependent on the content you're clearing, so I'll leave timestamps below for each set. We'll start with the Mythic Plus or AoE build. The notable talents here include Wild Surges down the left side, giving us increased crit chance with our builders, Starfire and Wrath. And this also plays into Astral Smolder, causing our crits with these abilities to languish the target, dealing extra damage over time. And finally, this plays into our Waning Twilight talent on the left, which increases our damage done to the target by 10% when they are debuffed with 3 periodic effects. Twin Moons will make applying dots easier by also hitting a second target every time you press Moonfire. And Celestial Alignment is our main cooldown, aligning us in both eclipses and increasing our haste by 10%. This is further buffed when we take Incarnation Chosen of Elune further down the tree, increasing our crit chance by 10% and also making it last 30 seconds. This is a 3-minute cooldown, but by taking Primordial Arcanic Pulsar, every 600 astral power we spend grants us Incarnation for 12 seconds. We'll pick up New Moon, which after use turns to Half Moon and then Full Moon, generating massive amounts of astral power and dealing significant damage. We'll call even more Full Moons down with our Orbit Breaker talent, proccing every 30 shooting stars. Balance of All Things will grant us massive amounts of crit every time we enter an eclipse, meaning we want to use our hardest hitting abilities just after we enter our eclipses. Finally, Denizen of the Dream causes our main dots to have a chance to spawn a fairy dragon, and with the Friend of the Fade talent beneath, when a dragon is summoned, we deal 10% increased damage for 20 seconds. Moving on to the raid or single target build. Here we are going to pick up Warrior of Elune to enter back into eclipses quicker, as well as Nature's Balance to passively generate more astral power. To make these changes, we've simply taken the points out of Starfall on the right hand side, as we won't be needing that for pure single target. As far as stats go for the Balanced Druid, Intellect is going to be your most important stat. Your best secondary stats are Mastery, followed by Haste and Critical Strike, and Versatility will help you in harder content, but it is definitely not a desired stat. Crafting is pretty simple for the Balanced Druid. You'll craft 2 off pieces of gear with a blue silken lining embellishment on them, ideally braces and a ring for the free socket. The extra Mastery is easily your BIS with as little as 30% uptime on the buff. After these crafts, I'd recommend you to craft the Vibrant Wildercloth Shawl, as personally I don't feel like the Sarkarath Cloak is a good option. For trinkets, your best in slots will be Neltharion's Call to Suffering, as well as Whispering Incarnate icon. This combo gives you some nice passive stats while giving you some crazy burst when your Nelth trinket procs. Other options for trinkets include the Tome of Unstable Power for any AoE encounters. The Iridius Fragment is a great pickup for some insane burst with every incarnation window, and then Pips and Ominous Chromatic Essence are great stat sticks if you can't get your hands on your BIS just yet. Here is a list of the best gear to spend your Bullions on. Vakash the Shadowed Inferno is your biggest upgrade due to its rarity and strength, so you'll want to spend your first Bullions on grabbing this weapon. After this, I'd opt for some trinkets. Neltharion's Call to Suffering and Whispering Incarnate icon are great all-round choices, and then after this you'll go for the Seal of Filial Duty ring. For enchants, you'll want to use Sophic Devotion on your weapon. You'll enchant your head with the Incandescent Essence. You'll enchant with Avoidance on your Cloak and Braces to help with survivability. Waking stats will be your chest enchant. On your belt, you'll rock with the Shadowed Belt Clasp, and then we'll use Frozen Spell Thread for your legs. On your boots, you'll apply a Watcher's Loam. And for your rings, I recommend you to sim what your best stat enchants will be, but generally you can enchant with Devotion of Mastery. For consumables, you'll want to run a File of Elemental Chaos, though tepid versatility is relatively close in damage but also provides some extra tankiness, so lots of players will opt for this in harder content. Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power will be your DPS potion of choice, with the Dreamwalker's Healing Potion being your go-to healing potion. On your weapon you want to use Hissing or Howling runes, and if you can afford it, the Dreambound Augment rune will be used in all situations. For your food buff you want to consume a feast ideally, but Deviously Deviled Eggs are a good backup as some personal food. Lastly, for your gems you'll want to run with a Skillful and Limited Diamond as your Primalist gem, and then you can fill the remaining slots with Keen Netherite. Finally, let's move on to the rotation. Some general tips for the Balanced Druid include always keeping your dots up, mainly Moonfire and Sunfire. You should also always be inside of an Eclipse to maximize your damage, using Solar Eclipse for up to 2 targets and Lunar Eclipse for anything more. Lastly, you always want to be casting. Leaving seconds between your casts is where your main DPS will be lost. Reapply your dots or spend Astral Power when you need to move. Now getting into the opener, we'll start with a single target build for Raid. You'll start by precasting 2 Wraths at 2 seconds on the pull timer, then we'll apply Moonfire and Sunfire. Here we'll use Incarnation as well as Trinkets and Potions. Then we cast Star Surge. Here we'll cast Wrath to build Astral Power, and then we'll cast New Moon without overcapping on Astral Power. Following this opener, you'll proceed with the following priority list. Apply and maintain Moonfire and Sunfire, and you'll refresh them before they fall off. As it's single target, your next priority is to stay in Solar Eclipse. Then we'll cast Star Surge to avoid overcapping on Astral Power. Then we'll cast a New Moon to avoid overcapping on charges, but do try to save them for Incarnation windows. And finally, we'll cast Wrath to generate Astral Power. Now we'll move on to the Mythic Plus or AoE rotation, starting with this opener. We'll apply Moonfire and Sunfire to all targets. Then we're going to use Incarnation as well as Trinkets and Potions. Then we'll cast Starfall until you're starved of Astral Power. Next we cast New Moons to use Full Moon inside Incarnation. And then we'll spam Starfire on 3+ targets. After this opener, we'll follow this priority list. We'll apply and maintain Moonfire and Sunfire and refresh before they fall off. Next we'll stay inside Lunar Eclipse. Here we'll cast Starfall to avoid overcapping Astral Power. Then we're going to cast Full Moon inside Incarnation windows. Our next priority is to spam Starfire on 3+ targets, and inside Incarnation we'll cast Wrath on up to 3 targets. We'll now move on to some advanced tips for the Balanced Druid for people looking to min-max their DPS. Optimizing your Starlord buff is going to be important. To do this, simply bank Astral Power towards the end of your Starlord buff without overcapping, so that you can dump Astral Power and gain 3 stacks pretty much immediately once it falls off. At the same time, dumping Astral Power and then Full Moons immediately after entering an Eclipse will give you maximum critical strike chance thanks to Balance of all things. This will definitely increase your DPS. My last tip is managing your Eclipses carefully, using Solar Eclipse for up to 2 targets and Lunar Eclipse for anything more. The reason I've mentioned this again is just because there's more than 3 mobs doesn't always mean you should be entering Lunar Eclipse. If the mobs are spread and you can only actively hit 2 of them, then you should still enter a Solar Eclipse. Finally, here are some of the macros I use as a Balanced Druid. I'll leave a pastebin in the description for you guys to copy. My first macro here will use all of my cooldowns alongside my potions and trinkets. The reason I have an @cursor macro here is because if you're using Orbital Strike, you actually need to click on the ground for where you're going to send your Incarnation to apply your dots and do damage through Orbital Strike. So if I am talented into this, it will just go where my cursor already is. Otherwise, if I'm not talented into Orbital Strike, it will ignore the @cursor part of the macro. Here I have a completely separate macro to cancel my Starlord aura. This is a minimal DPS gain. But if I'm capped on Astral Power towards the end of my Starlord buff, I'll just simply hit this macro, it will cancel it, and then I can dump my Astral Power to get 3 stacks of Starlord instantly. Here I have a mouse over macro for my Remove Corruption if I'm talented into it. This allows me to easily dispel my teammates without targeting them. But that's all you need to know for the Balanced Druid, so hopefully you guys were able to learn a few things. If you did, then please feel free to drop a like down below and subscribe to your boy. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.